Welcome to the Creating Wealth Podcast, where Kyle Curtin takes you on an extraordinary journey alongside renowned multifamily real estate sponsors and syndication experts from every corner of the United States. We teach you how to harness the power of passive real estate investing and witness the transformation of your wealth building strategy. Let's create wealth together.
Hey guys, how is everything going? This is Kyle from Creating Wealth for episode number 125, I believe. Super excited about this one. It's another solo show, and I'm incredibly excited to talk about the topic that I have for us today. So that is one that I've been thinking about for quite some time now. Read a couple books recently that especially, really just brought out the same concepts, almost just, written down in different ways with different types of formulas, little bits and pieces from each book. But at the very end of the day, everything revolving around pretty much the same exact concept. And the four books that I'm going to mention today are The 80-20 Principle by Richard Koch, 10X is Easier Than 2X by Benjamin Hardy, Who Not How by Dan Sullivan and also Benjamin Hardy, as well as The One Thing by Jay Papasan. So many of you guys have probably read at least one of these books. If not, I highly recommend you do so. And I highly recommend that you read all of them, actually. Because essentially, the item that all of these books have in common is that attention is the commodity. And I got that directly from 10X is Easier Than 2X. And it's basically branded in my brain. Like that one phrase alone, And the reason why, guys, is essentially the element that all of these books have in common. Attention is the commodity, as well as essentially focusing on the least amount of directions or avenues or bridges if you're Brandon Turner, and going ridiculously deep on those bridges. And essentially not trying to do way too many different types of things, build way too many bridges at the same time, and only going a little bit far on each of them because your attention is divided. So the thing here is it's such an incredibly heavy concept the more that you continue to read it, And I'm not sure how you guys kind of feel, in terms of like the universe and spirituality and all that type of thing. But once in a while, I feel like, there are some things that are kind of jutting out at me, or lessons that I meant to learn at a certain point, in my business journey and in life in general. Just certain things that just happen to show up, multiple times at a particular point in your life, that it's almost like you're kind of, being egged on to like pay attention and just learn this journey. And I'm going to start off actually a tiny bit out of order because I do have a couple bullet points that I want to hit on in this episode. One of those being, and this is actually a really cool segue, into what I'm going to jump into and dig into more detail here. But so essentially last year, right? I actually almost 2 years ago at this point, when I was still living in Leominster, I had this absolutely huge, like 5 foot by 6 foot whiteboard, right? Like this thing was friggin' enormous. And basically I had this thing subdivided and essentially compartmentalized into about 4 different directions, or 5, I think. I don't even remember. And essentially how they were divided up was basically the different avenues, or I'm going to call them bridges just for the sake of this episode to kind of keep things easy. So essentially, with these bridges at the time I had, working on the house myself, getting the unit all, spiffed up and everything, all, painted, like the cabinets done, the whole 9 yards, right? I had like a whole bucket list full of items. And, I was still in that pretty green mentality of essentially, like, most of the time when you buy that first property, of, feeling like you need to do a lot of the work yourself to save money and learn as much as you can and all that type of thing. And essentially, so I had in the first section was the house with the huge bucket list of everything that I had to do, before I could get that unit rented and all that type of thing. I had the agent side, the real estate agent side, where I had a couple clients that I was working with, some systems that I was kind of starting to put together, like some marketing things, like that type of deal. I had, what else did I have? I had the podcast. Um, and at that time, I was doing the podcast. I was doing interviews every single week. So it was definitely, pretty taxing at that time in terms of bandwidth, as well as, working on, really honing in on, or I should say the early days of getting the show delegated out, to shout out to Christian. Love you, buddy. He is the absolutely awesome editor on our team that's been editing the show for the past, like, probably 2 years now at this point. So yeah, like, there was a lot going on with that, and trying to figure out the next vision for the podcast, like what the immediate next step was and all these types of things. I also, was tied in with a hard money company at the time, and, kind of trying that out as something to essentially as like an ancillary type of business, in addition to all the other bridges that I was working on at that time. So, trying to build like systems and marketing and all this stuff for the hard money stuff, as well as I think I had something else as well. Um, I'm trying to remember, but what's that for? I believe. Yeah. So the house agency, hard money, and the podcast. And I think I had like the investor side as well. I had like, buy like a 6 to 10 unit on there, like not knowing how the hell it would happen, but trying to figure out like my plan for the next property as well. You know what I mean? But yeah, so basically my point being when I mentioned that is that a lesson that I learned now, and what I keep, kind of hinting, teasing on, I guess, if you will, uh, that comes from each of these 4 books is something that I hadn't even learned yet, like not even close to being at the point where I picked up, who, not how, and the one thing and things like that, to really kind of factor in where my time should be best well spent. And I came across that picture the other day of that whiteboard. Um, and I think I'm gonna post it because I feel like there's a lot of lessons to be learned there, right? And I can absolutely go down the rabbit holes of like, um, what's the phrase? The crap, man, I forget what the shiny object syndrome. I can definitely go down the rabbit hole of shiny object syndrome and like trying to work on way too many things. Um, but essentially, like, what I realized in the moment, because at that point in time for a little while, I was ridiculously stressed out. You know what I mean? I actually had started a different position at my day job as well at that time. So I kind of had something else going on, like almost in essentially like part of another trade that I was, starting to kind of pick up. Something I had never really kind of crossed that bridge before. So there was essentially basically like 5 different things going on at the same time that I was trying to put a lot of time and effort into. And as you guys may have guessed, my biggest lesson from that year, of 2021, or I should say like pretty much 2022, as kind of a whole, is essentially that the, you know, basically Brandon Turner's analogy of building the bridges. You can either focus on building one bridge go all the way to the island, just work on that one bridge, and you cross the chasm, you're there. Now you can use the resources from the island, go back to build the bridges to the other side, and continue leveraging off of the first 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So, like many of you guys may have guessed, I mean, in my opinion, I didn't make a whole lot of progress in that year. And what I attribute that to is basically, just trying to have my time and direction in way too many different places at the same time. So it's a little hard to like, write out the EOS vision organizer for the agency side, and continue to do showings and figure out the hard money thing while painting the house at 2 a.m. at the same time and still having, weekly guests somehow from the podcast and staying ahead. And it was something that it was a tough time, man. And the reason that I was very, very excited to do this podcast is because I feel like this is a concept that can speak to a lot of people out there in general, but also folks that might be a lot earlier into the entrepreneurial journey, and where I was at that point in time, because essentially 10x is easier than 2x mentioned it best of attention is the commodity. Where you focus your attention is the biggest thing in the entire world. And the fewer things that you can do, you're going to be a bajillion times better the more like niche down and specific you get. And essentially, instead of going, an inch deep and 1,000 miles wide, go 1,000 inches deep. And no, it didn't come out right. Instead of going extremely wide, go ridiculously narrow and go extremely deep. Almost, kind of like a shotgun versus a sniper approach, right? Like a shotgun is like, sprays in a million different directions and that kind of thing. But may not necessarily like, kind of hit that hard or whatever, versus a sniper approach that's ridiculously targeted and packs a freaking punch. And yeah, so essentially like the biggest things that I can highly recommend from those books are with the one thing, what is the one thing that by doing such will make everything else either easier or unnecessary? This book hit me in the face like a sack of bricks, guys, like in a phenomenal way. And I wish I read this book like way before I did, because basically, like, not to spoil the book, but that kind of was like the whole book in a sentence, is like basically try to figure out of everything that you have going on, and potential avenues that you can go, which ones are the most impactful that by doing such will make everything else either unnecessary or, it just doesn't serve you as well as, just doing one thing would be. So, a little bit of an example there is I've gotten ridiculously niched down to the syndication side. So I've absolutely fell in love with it. That is my, inch wide and mile deep. You know what I mean? I have the syndication stuff. I have the podcast, which ties directly into the syndication stuff. As you can see from some of my past guests, they're all folks in kind of the multifamily sector, as well as the house in Leominster, and that's not necessarily related, but that's kind of my, few different avenues in the business arena. So another thing that I can get to here is essentially who, not how. So another thing that went through my brain, right, at that point in time in Leominster, where I really started to kind of question things of, having all these different avenues and trying to make progress in all of them. And it's not like I had like, teams of like 3 to 5 people in each of these activities. It was literally just me. And I feel like something like this, guys, is something that's very easy to just kind of slip into, and that's something I love having these conversations. And I was very excited to do this podcast because I wanted to share essentially the awareness of making sure you pay attention to how your time is best spent and, the different avenues that you're trying to go. And the thing that's interesting is it's easier said than done, right? And this is another conversation that, I have with people relatively often. And there's a little bit more beef that's gotten added onto that, and a little bit more depth, I should say. That's, now kind of an accessory to that conversation. And that being, man, is it's so easy to just say like, oh, like, well, if you like just want to be an agent, like screw everything else, just go be an agent. I feel like it's easier said than done because I should say it's easier said than done for entrepreneurs because things are always moving. Variables are always going. Doors are always opening. Opportunities are always, coming about. And you also don't want to be closed-minded at the same time. But you don't want to be open-minded enough that you're being spread way too thin across way too many different types of avenues. And it's something that's incredibly interesting, and it's something that, although I definitely have the awareness, from these 4 books and constantly consuming, constantly having conversations with people about this kind of stuff, and having kind of a good grasp on the self-awareness angle of it and how I, tend to like to treat it with myself and being self-aware of my time, as well as the impact of saying no to things. Because when you say no to something, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And if that something else is something that is essentially your one thing, that, that by doing such makes everything else unnecessary or just not worth doing in general, it's interesting, So I think the big takeaway here, guys, is essentially like stay ridiculously focused, try to limit the amount of different avenues that you go down, but also you want to definitely be open to trying out different things. As Gary Vaynerchuk says, you don't know if you like pizza until you taste pizza. You need to get out there and taste, And I feel like for everybody, and this is just my opinion here, guys, based on the bit of experience that I've had, since the whiteboard, is essentially like just finding out what the best use of time is for you, and what avenues are the best for you, and figuring out that balance between, not being open-minded at all and literally just keeping your head down like an ostrich and focusing on, just one particular avenue, whether that's syndications or agency or wholesaling or flipping or whatever you do. But also not being open-minded enough, like, or not being too open-minded to the point that everything that you do, your attention is diluted across everything because now your progress won't continue to go far, or I should say it's going to take drastically longer to make an impact in a lot of those activities because you don't have, you're not giving that the appropriate bandwidth, and time that it needs. Another thing that I can stem onto here is when it comes to who, not how. This is one that's incredibly interesting too, and one that I'm really getting a good grasp on, literally like today and yesterday, and especially for the past like month or two. So essentially, Who Not How, another absolutely favorite book of many of us guys. Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy freaking crushed this one. But essentially, what that one talks about is the dynamic of, instead of trying to figure out who, I'm sorry. Instead of trying to figure out essentially how do you figure out how to do this task on your own, and like, don't ask anybody for help and just YouTube University, just Google it, like whatever that looks like for you. Figuring out the who that you can go to help you get this task done. And a very popular example, I'll give you the example that I'm personally doing right now on Lemonster, is because I'm not living in that building anymore. The two long-term units are rented. The other unit is the MTR, like building's fully occupied. So essentially I'm managing from, my hometown, from about, 35-ish minutes away. And Who Not How it's getting very strong very quickly. Although I'm not going to lie to you, like there are definitely some spurts where it stings a little bit. Because essentially what I'm doing over there is I'm relying completely on my operational systems as well as the boots on the ground crew that's over there. And it's very indirect, guys. You know what I mean? Like, I don't literally have like a dedicated like little company of like in-house workers, employees or partners or whatever like that. You just shoot them a text and they go. But it is incredibly indirect. And what I mean by that is essentially, I have an electrician out there who's friggin' awesome, around the area. Any electrical issues, shoot him a text, give him a call. He goes out there, does his thing. We hop on a phone call. He tells me, it's whatever, it's nothing, or, I reset X or whatever. And I just write him a check and I send it in the mail. I got to stay in my hometown that whole night. Same thing with, I've been having no heat issues in the MTR unit for a couple different reasons, but I have a phenomenal little oil team that goes out there that's been taking care of me since literally the second week that I moved into the building. And there have been some issues going on over there. It's I believe October 11th of 2023. And yesterday we just had like a 40-degree day. Today was friggin' chilly as well. Like, we're starting to get to that time, you know what I mean? And so my oil guys ended up going out there last night while I was at a meetup, giving a presentation. And we were just texting back and forth. Like, he switched out a couple things, and he ended up coming back this morning and getting everything going and everything. And yeah, like, we were just texting back and forth, left and right. He'll email me the invoice and I just write him a check and throw it in the mail. That's the definition of who, not how, guys. Instead of me going out to Leominster, or, I literally didn't have time yesterday, because I got out of work, I got ready and started driving to Lunenburg for our presentation, our meetup, So I'm like, I didn't have time to go over to Leominster, screw around with the boiler. Like, I most likely wouldn't have tools on me. You know what I mean? So it's essentially like who, not how, essentially gives you the ability to choose your role and stick to it. And most of the time for many of us guys, like you guys know, we're self-managing buildings to try and save costs, instead of hiring just a PM. Like, for a pretty fair amount of units, I feel like you can self-manage and, still do pretty awesome. And, but just all relying on your boots on the ground, as well as your operational systems, like, Z Deposit in Massachusetts for managing and holding security deposits correctly. Apartments.com for rent collection. Tenants, like, just text me to my personal cell or whatever, and even that's something that you could change. Having your boots on the ground team to take care of any maintenance issues, handyman, electrician, plumber, a person to cut the grass, or a landscaper rather, snow plowing / grass cutting guy. I got 2 different guys for that. And yeah, and that should cover literally like 99% of any issues that do come up, and other than that, like, you most likely have other friends in the area that have multis. Shoot them a text, be like, oh, hey man, I need a mason because I need, 2 chimney caps put on before the first snowfall, and it's like, it's easy enough. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, so who, not how is definitely a big one. Who, not how is a little bit expensive, because you're delegating out to professionals. It allows you to recover your time. And I think for the path, if you're listening to this right now, our path is literally to continue to grow and build up, these businesses, and continue to buy more rental properties, continue to invest passively in deals. You need your time to continue to focus on the things that actually matter. Because again, attention is the freaking commodity. I can't say it enough times, guys, And I mean, even to boil it down as well, the 80-20 principle by Richard Koch, that's another one, along the same freaking vein here, guys. Figure out, the 20% of whatever part of your business it is, whether it's marketing or doing lead gen, what specific avenues generate 80% of the results, and like if you can literally just focus on that 20% that gets done 80% of the results, and it's easier said than done, guys, you know what I mean? Like, but you never know, you know what I mean? And that's actually a really nice segue into the same exact type of lesson from 10x is easier than 2x by Ben Hardy. Is I'm going to tell you a story about the one of the companies in that book, and this story is taken directly from that book. So essentially, there was a trucking company, right? And or trucking, transportation, delivery, that type of thing. And essentially, this trucking company, they had two types of deliveries. They had your regular, delivery that was a lot less stringent on deadlines. They made, a pretty smaller fee for delivering the goods or supplies or what have you. And then they also had their high priority deliveries that, that's like crazy stuff, like police escorts, like deliveries needed to be down to the minute, like no screwing around, like we gotta be there like ASAP right now, like super high stress, but the returns were a lot higher, the fees were a lot higher. So what this company eventually did over time is they ended up focusing just on serving the 20% of those high priority deliveries. So eventually, they ended up having this dynamic shift, and it took a while, guys. Like this wasn't like a, 2-day thing. Like they're like, you know what? I'm done with all the 80%. Like let's literally just go crazy, and just do the high profile deliveries. And essentially what they did over time was, just really hone in on their craft on the high priority deliveries, and serving those clients the best that they could, while at the same time taking on less and less of the previous 80% of, the lower cost or lower return deliveries. So like eventually, they ended up just kind of like dropping off the 80% and just focusing on the 20%. Over time, guys, the 20% became their 80% again. So like those, out of those high profile deliveries, that ended up like taking place in the entire business. And it's a story that continues to stick with me. And the reason that I keep going on and on about this, guys, is because all of these books are telling you the same freaking thing. That's that the smallest things that mean the most are where your attention needs to be given to. And the more attention that you can put towards those things, the more crazy that your business can get, the more accelerated of a rate that you can go, the faster you can freaking, get to the next 20%, the quicker everything goes, and it's easier said than done. You know what I mean? But like I said, so like that's essentially what I wanted to talk about today. Is just focus your attention on the things that really freaking matter. Attention is the commodity. Figure out your 20%, your 80-20, the 20% that gets done 80% of your net profits in your business. Like if you're buying a portfolio, like, maybe consider trimming off some of the fat, some of the units that might, not be as profitable, might take up more time, shave it off, sell them off, whatever. Who, not how, eventually when you get to that point, there are who, not how, I feel like is, complements the rest of these things incredibly nicely. So, I mean, at least for a while, guys, like you start a business and it's you that's like a one man or a one woman show that's doing freaking everything, Who, not how shows you essentially how to like start to delegate yourself out of it. To eventually, get to that role that you truly desire, and who knows, I mean, I work with a couple absolutely awesome teammates. They are out of the Philippines, and the the woman Kathleen, who is absolutely amazing. Shout out to you, Kathleen, if you're listening to this. She helps a lot with a lot of different things, you know what I mean? Like scheduling social media posts and like helping with campaigns for investors, for the syndication stuff, like just general marketing, like a bajillion different things, you know. And then Christian on the video side, he does a ton, you know, in the post-production, you know, and like I draw up some things for him, record the shows and that type of thing, and essentially, you know, hand it off to him, and he does the rest. You know, he makes like some absolutely gorgeous artwork, some gorgeous thumbnails, and schedules everything to post, like the whole 9 yards. So that's something that complements everything, is take the lesson from Who Not How, delegate yourself to a point where you're able to start to think about the 20% that gets 80% of your revenue, you know, and eventually your net income, you know, while at the same time thinking about, you know, the one thing that you can do to start to get to that point, that by doing such will make everything else either unnecessary or, you know, just does not make sense. I keep forgetting that second word because I'm getting excited. But yeah, so that's pretty much everything for today, guys. I was very excited to talk about this one because I actually just read 10x is easier than 2x was the one that really, really got me to think. I mean, I read the one thing probably I'd say maybe a little over a year ago, as well as Who Not How. And I had like this weird feeling when I was going to read Who Not How. Almost like I literally judged a book by its cover. I'm like, damn, like I have a weird gut feeling that this book is gonna like change everything. And like I really hope it lives up to my expectations. And it absolutely blew my expectations out of the water, because that's literally a principle that I apply basically every single day, you know, and I still have a lot to learn about, you know, leadership and brand development and that type of thing. And working extremely well alongside, you know, the team of Christian and Kathleen, you know, to really kind of start to get to that point. And, you know, but it's always a fun journey, guys. Like this type of thing, like I love these types of conversations. If anybody ever wants to talk about like Who Not How, like how the hell do I delegate this thing, you know, am I going in the right direction, I would love to talk to you, you know what I mean, because I feel like this stuff is absolutely critical, um especially, you know, coming from somebody who literally had 5 different friggin' careers all drawn on the same whiteboard. And only being one guy, as well as having a 40-hour-a-week job, trying to figure out a new trade, like, you know, keep a podcast consistent, like paint the walls on a house, do the cabinets, like in a really like crappy way, you know, but the best I could. And like, yeah, it was, you know, taking forever and it was super, super stressful. So the solution to that is literally cut down on friggin' everything and figure out the smallest amount of items that will get you the closest to your vision the fastest, you know, and like delegate yourself strategically. You know, always say always stay self-aware, you know, where your time is being spent. Figure out, you know, the least amount of things that you personally need to do to make the biggest impact, and not basically feel like you're spinning your wheels, and just run with it, you know, continue delegating things out, and keep learning, my friends. But yeah, please share this one with anybody out there who's kind of struggling with this type of thing, you know, anybody who's kind of, you know, in a lot of different directions, which it's a phenomenal thing, right, guys? I'm absolutely not knocking that by any means. And like I mentioned earlier in the show, there's got to be a balance there, you know, of being open-minded enough, or of being ridiculously focused enough to have your limited time and attention go ridiculously deep in the smallest amount of activities, but not be too open-minded that you're getting shiny object syndrome and you're looking at everything and your attention's getting spread way too thin and you're only moving a couple inches forward in each thing because it's going to take forever and a day. Been there, done that. But all right, guys. Yeah. If you could, please leave a rating and a review on the show. I absolutely love doing these kind of episodes as well as interviewing syndicators. Always a crap ton of fun. And yeah, we're all about taking action here. And yeah, I hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day today. Happy Monday. Get out there and crush it. And yeah, I will talk to you soon, my friends. Take it easy.
That's a wrap for today's episode. We want to thank you for being a valued listener of the Creating Wealth Podcast. Make sure to visit www.creatingwealth.com to connect with us. Dive into our ever-expanding library of informative blogs. Get access to our private investor portal and explore a wide range of additional valuable resources. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to create wealth together.